Hello, everybody. Welcome back to D&D Block Party and the first ever live interview for Behold Her podcast. We are joined today by the lovely LaTia, who is a, D&D writer, streamer, community manager for the D&D Adventurers League. I kind of feel like the list of things that you do or don't do would be shorter and easier to list right now. LaTia, thanks so much for joining me for Behold Her.
Thank you for inviting me. I love the podcast, so of course I'm happy to be on it.
And I've wanted you on the show for a while, so I'm really excited for the excuse to just chat with you and get to know your journey in D&D a little bit better.
Sure.
So to start us off, how about you tell us, how did you get into tabletop role-playing games?
So it probably, it actually started probably right after high school. 3.5 was the thing, and I used 3.5 to create characters for stories that I was writing, but never actually played. And then I think a couple years later, I played my first 3.5 game with my best friend. I was a human who did not know that she should not be the first person to go into dark rooms.
Oh no.
It was hilarious because at the end of the game, I realized that I had torches the whole time. So I'm just this bumbling fighter or whatever who's going into rooms and activating all the traps and,
That's
getting into the shenanigans.
Of detecting traps.
Absolutely. Getting into all the shenanigans and then realizing that I just could have looked for them with the fire sticks in my pocket. Fast forward to just before 5e comes out, I'm in a 4e campaign with some friends that kind of broke up when I moved away from where they were. But then 5e came out, and release day one, I went to get the player's handbook. And then I actually didn't even play a game until Out of the Abyss came out.
Okay.
So a little bit of a gap there, but after Out of the Abyss, we kind of took a break from that. And then I found Adventurers League in 2017. So I joined a couple games at a comic book store, and that transitioned to me DMing for the first time, which then transitioned to me DMing at conventions, which then transitioned into me writing stuff. And now I'm writing more stuff, and I'm adminning for Adventures League. And like you said, the list just goes on and on. I really sometimes have to stop and sit and think about what all do I do?
Yeah, and it feels like everything really started to snowball in a good way once you started participating in the Adventurers League.
Yes. Super shout out to Adventures League, and this isn't to promote Adventures League, but it was really where I found my groove, because the community was super nice. And then going to conventions and having everybody, when you DM for the first time, you're like, I did a terrible job. And I went from DMing a small table of 5 or 6 to DMing multiple tables just in the span of a year. I think I went from just regular DMing to I could do this regularly. 6 months later, I'm DMing 6 tables at a convention. What?
What do you feel like you learned through DMing? Not just learning to DM for a group of friends, a lot of people's first experiences, but learning to DM in an official play setting and then in a convention setting?
They're not too much different. DMing at conventions, you're kind of on a time crunch because you've got games that are sometimes one right after the other, or you've got a little bit of a break between. But really rolling with it is, to get a little punny here, rolling with it is probably one of the quickest things to learn, because when you're DMing Adventures League especially, there's a bit of a railroading element, because there's certain points that you have to hit, and you have to finish it's technically a one shot. You have to finish the one shot within the allotted time. So there's definitely room to have those really good character moments, but you're also just, stuck within those constraints. But to me, I think what I learned would probably just be, just have fun. Don't be afraid. Like my first big convention, I had to run a table cold with, I think maybe 10 minutes of prep. A DM didn't show up for their table, and I was free. So I was asked, to, run that table, and they were all so patient, and, it was one of the best tables at the convention. So really just kind of going with that flow and not worrying so much. Like if you've got a good mind for prep and for how the adventures usually go, you can pick it up pretty quickly. Yeah, let me see if I can turn my mic up a little bit.
Oh yeah, we're getting a few comments in chat. Thanks for helping us keep
Does that sound better?
Production up to, well, just make production better. Words are hard, everybody.
I can also just move closer to it. I'll do that.
Sweet. So how did you make the transition from DMing a heck of a bunch to becoming a D&D designer, a writer?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that. When I was DMing for, because my primary conventions are GameholeCon and GaryCon because they're local and I don't have to do a lot of traveling. But I mentioned to the admin table at GaryCon one year that I was like, hey, if y'all need any help with anything, awesome, y'all, thank you. If y'all need any help with anything, let me know. I'm available. I want to help out. And to me, that meant helping at the admin table at conventions. that didn't mean, and not that it's a bad thing, but it didn't mean, hey, do you want to write some adventures for us? But yeah, I was approached after GaryCon 2019 to do some writing, and that was the beginning of it.
What was your immediate reaction upon being asked that?
I'm not a writer. Yeah, that was it. Like, absolutely yes, but I'm not a writer. I don't know the first thing about designing a D&D, how to write a D&D module. But I don't say no to a lot of things. So I definitely didn't say no to that.
Yeah. Was it exciting? Was it intimidating?
All of those things. Because
D, all of the above.
Yes, D. I like being a part of the AL community made me want to be a part of the larger D&D community just as a whole. So I was like, whatever I can do to help out, or, not even get my foot in the door, but I just wanted to be a part of it all, and it turns out that writing was just one of the many ways that I started to do that.
So as a designer, being a D&D designer or writer gets compared to being a DM a lot because there are a lot of similarities. There's also a lot of differences. But as a dungeon master, you are a storyteller. So you did we all have imposter syndrome, right? So I have days where I'm like, I'm not a writer. But you were a storyteller. So as you started writing your first adventure, did that perception of yourself change? Do you feel like you learned any major lessons from that first opportunity?
Yes. So the first thing I wrote, which I can't talk about yet. I still can't talk about it. The first thing that I wrote, I had the idea for it, and it's really surprising how once you just start with that idea and you start you start writing it down, how the details just kind of start to go. It's like, there's this person and they're looking for something, but you start off not knowing where the something is, but then as you begin to flesh out the people and the world, it's like, oh, that thing's clearly over there. Now, how am I going to make it hard for my players to get the thing? What are they going to fight? Who are they going to meet? So yeah, it all just starts to kind of like snowball together. And for me, and I think for a lot of designers, the first thing you write is never what it ends up being. You know, I will always go through, usually at the 11th hour, I will always have a design change where it's like, no, this isn't what's happening. This is what's happening. Like for one of my D&D Beyond adventures, a storm celebration. My favorite part of that little adventure is the direwolf jousting, which was not the first thing that I thought. Yeah, right, right. And I was like, what kind of like celebratory events would a clan of orcs and half orcs have? I'm like, absolutely. Like, I'm like, I need one more thing, and it was like 3 a.m, and I was like, direwolf jousting. Like, absolutely. Absolutely.
3 a.m. lying in bed ideas and in the shower ideas are sometimes the best ideas.
They are. I carry so much paper with me because these ideas just like strike out of nowhere. And I'm like, I have to get it down. If I don't get it down, it's going to go away.
Just listening to you talk about your process. I mean, I know that you're a lot further from that first time you were said someone asked you, hey, do you want to write an adventure for us? And your reaction was, I'm not a writer, but you are 100%, you've got a designer brain in you. So I hope that imposter syndrome, you've made some progress on that.
I have. It's hard. You know, we deal with creatives and non-creatives alike deal with imposter syndrome pretty much constantly. But I think the more you do something, the less the imposter syndrome immediately creeps up on you, because you've got this barrier of your accomplishments that is like, no, imposter syndrome, you have to get through all of these other things that I've done despite you to, you know, tickle at to give me bad brain today. So yeah, it's definitely come a lot farther than it was.
Do you feel like you have any little rituals or techniques of how to deal with a bad brain imposter syndrome days?
Yes. Most of it involves me just kind of yelling at myself. Like, really just the hard truths, like, you have written things, you are a good writer, people like what you do. I guess positive affirmation.
Yeah, but in a mean way.
Right. There's this mental image of me sitting at my desk right here, and then I'm right here, like, wagging my finger at myself. Like, you are good. You have done good things. Everyone is going, well, not everyone, but people like what you write. And that's the end of that. And I'm like, fine.
You just kind of like list the facts. And then you're faced with this wall of facts. It's harder to let that false voice in your head get to you. Absolutely. So let's move on to the Adventurers League, because this year you've come into your role as the community manager for the Adventurers League. And I admit I'm like kind of really excited personally to talk to you about this, having been a community manager for AL myself. So what went through your head when someone approached you about that? And has it been what you expected?
So when I was approached, it was really out of the blue. My fellow community manager, Amy Lindezura, a wonderful, wonderful lady. I don't remember if it was over Facebook or if it was over Twitter. She was like, hey, we're looking to add another community manager, and you were recommended to me. That's the thing that always gets me when people tell me that I was recommended for something, because I'm like, who told? Who said I was good at something? And there was not an instant in my mind that I was like, I don't want to do this. I was like, oh my gosh, yes. Put my name in whatever hat you need to, and let's do this. So the offer was immediately like, yes, I want to do this. And so far, yeah, it's been really fun. The current state of the world has kind of taken a lot of the things that I would normally be doing. At least in the community manager way, like, going to the various conventions that I was already going to, but, going in an AL admin capacity to do stuff. And it's kind of taken that a little bit of the fun out of that. But the community is wonderful. Every community's got its bad apples, but everyone has been so nice and welcoming, and I've been having a blast. Like, just getting to talk to my fellow community managers, who we call ourselves the Fates, because there's three of us.
Because there's 3 of you. That's awesome.
But it's been wonderful.
So for those who are less familiar with the Adventurers League, actually, there might be folks who are watching who have no idea what the Adventurers League is. So let us know. Well, let's start there. What is the D&D Adventurers League?
So D&D Adventurers League is Wizards' official, like, organized play campaign. So as the books, the official storyline books are released, there's also an overarching storyline that Adventurers League plays through that's kind of like the under campaign to whatever the official book is. So for Descent into Avernus, there's the Descent into Avernus book, but there's also the Adventurers League campaign, which is a series of one-shots or duologies or trilogies that take place in and around the Avernus situation. So it's almost like the side stories of what's going on. Like, the stories that we present in Adventurers League are kind of caused or brought on or influenced by the Avernus book or whatever campaign book we've got going on. So, for example, since Rime of the Frost Maiden has been announced, there will also be an Adventurers League campaign that goes alongside that book.
Yeah, there's always, like, the main heroes are, like, on their quest, but there's always something else going on in the world, like ramifications of these world-changing events. And Adventurers League deals with those. So what does a community manager do for the Adventurers League?
We, for every time someone asks me this, I said, well, we manage the community, of course. No, we make the announcements. We help out with getting the rules and events going. We answer everybody's questions. We have to know all the things, so that we can tell you the things. I've never really had a concrete definition for what a community manager does. I just know that I do it.
Community managers also often end up taking on community managers wear a lot of hats.
Yeah.
And they often end up taking on a bunch of roles. I've been in a number of community manager type roles, and the joke is always that you're kind of an everything manager.
That's what it feels like.
Yeah. So you wear a lot of hats as the AL community manager, but also as a writer, a streamer. You just joined Rivals, which, like, that's really exciting. And just a member of the community. Like you mentioned, like, you want to be involved in as many ways as possible. So what has it meant to you wearing all of these hats as a woman in the hobby and in the industry?
Yeah. It makes me feel like being in this position. I struggle. There are times where I struggle with, when the bad brain days are really bad. It's like, what really am I doing for in D&D and in the tabletop community? And one of the things that I kind of reconcile it with is, like, at the very least, there are other women, there are other Black women out there who are seeing a Black woman do something really awesome in the community. So it's not a big part of the reason that I took I do anything because I do the things that I do because I want to do them. But knowing that somebody can, watch Beholder podcast live, or watch Rivals, or go to a convention and see me as a Black woman, or Amy as a woman, and Ma'at as a non-binary community manager, seeing people who usually do not have these roles in these roles, like, it makes me just super happy. Yeah.
Does that ever add pressure? Do you ever feel that in doing the things you do?
Yes. Very, like, pretty frequently. There's always that, well, if you do it badly, then it may be like, well, she can't handle it, so maybe somebody else can't handle it. Or, this is what happens when you have, that we're not necessarily seen as unqualified, but, there's always those underlying tones of, oh, well, she was only hired because, and that's not what, like, that's never been the reason that I've done anything ever. So I just tell those people to kick rocks.
Yeah, I was just about to ask, have people actually, is that a hypothetical, or have people actually said that to you?
It is a hypothetical. I have never.
I was about to cancel this stream, go
punch somebody.
Yeah.
No, they're all hypotheticals. I have been extremely fortunate to encounter as little of that as possible. Whether it just be I managed to, like, avoid it, or I just have really good people around me. But I've never really encountered that in the community. So I'm very grateful for that.
I'm glad for that. But I think it's very interesting that knowing that that's happened to other people, and that that's a voice kind of in the back of your head anyway, that adds pressure to everything you do. And some days it might be a little more, like, forward in your mind than others. But I think that's important to recognize that marginalized genders and races and gosh, if any marginalized person in this hobby has to deal with, like, a little bit extra, even if they don't necessarily have, like, trolls all up in their business.
Like, there's just the systemic barriers are already in place, basically. And, even if you don't experience it as strongly as some other people do, like, just having those barriers in place is already kind of like a step back for some people.
How do you deal with that, especially when it is kind of forward in your mind? Or do you have advice if someone approach them and kind of explicitly state those fears that they have anyway? How would you handle that situation?
Wow, that's a good question. I don't really know how I would handle it. I'm the kind of person that, like, if someone ever approached me and said something super inflammatory like that, I'm the nervous laugher. So I'm not exactly sure what I would do, but what I would say to people is that if you are in the position that you are because of your work, you need to believe that. You need to continue to have that confidence because you're there for a reason. So when you have detractors or people who come up to you and say that your work is crappy or you don't deserve to be where you are, like, you're there for a reason. So you need to, like, shut that brain voice down for a second, and maybe even shut that physical person voice up. Like, just get out of there. Like, you don't need to listen to that because it's not true.
True. I know some people, engaging with people is their way of dealing with things, but you just mentioned, like, kind of shutting them out. You also don't have to engage with trolly people. Like, they're not necessarily worth your time.
Exactly. And no is a complete sentence. Feel free to just, shut it down, walk away, block that person, put your phone down. I'm a disengager. So if something like that happens to me, then I'm just gonna, like, no, not right now. Not
Yeah.
ever, maybe, but definitely not right now.
And that's a totally valid way to respond.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a few minutes left. So I'm wondering, was there anything I didn't ask you about that you want to talk about?
I don't think so. I think we covered it all pretty well. I mean,
Well,
we didn't really have an outline, so
yeah. This was a lovely meandering conversation, and I
yeah.
feel like you have such a breadth of experiences that just listening, you have a lot of wisdoms
Oh,
that are
thank
nice
you.
to listen to, whether you know it or not. Then I guess with our last minutes, I kind of want to ask you, how has it been joining Rivals?
Rivals has been really wonderful. Before I dig into that for the last minute, Nola asks if I have any cats. I do have a cat. His name is Kenway. He was named after an assassin. We call him Kenji. He doesn't live with me, but he is my big fat orange fluffy boy, and I love him. But yes, joining Rivals has been amazing because I've been watching them since they came on to the scene at Stream of Many Eyes, and I was like, I mean, I think everybody was like, it was Tanya's in chat.
I see Tanya too.
Edward Kenway, T-Boys from Black Flag. I've been watching them since they started, and watching a table of all Black and brown people was and they were Chicago based. The minute I knew that, I was like, one day I really I was like, if ever
Dreams do come true.
Yes. So to be asked to join the cast was literally a dream come true. I was over the moon.
Well, I'm really, really happy for you, and just seeing you succeed and grow and flourish in our hobby. I know that I'm so sure it is very meaningful to a lot of people to see someone like them, as a woman, as a Black woman, being given opportunities that you've been given and being able to flourish and represent. So thank you for everything that you do, LaTia, for the community and for Adventurers League and just everybody. So for folks who loved hearing this interview, want to know more about you and any projects you work on, how can they find you on the interwebs?
Twitter is the best way to find me. I'm at the Lady Tiefling on Twitter. I'm also at the Lady Tiefling on Instagram. So if you want to see pictures of Kenway or just the other stuff that I do, you can find me there. It was also mentioned in chat that I have started streaming. So you can find me on Twitch, twitch.tv/the Lady Tiefling, where mostly I stream really chill Minecraft. It's one of my favorite games, so I just kind of build and do whatever, and we just have a nice time and chat. So
I love me a gentle stream.
I think we need a lot of it now.
Oh, yeah. Thank you again, LaTia, for joining us. Coming up next, we are going to talk with Aabria Iyengar. I think Celeste is going to have me stay on the stream to chit chat with you. So we're going to continue this lovely block party. And I don't know how transitioning is going to happen, so I'm just going to finger dance until it does happen.
I'm going to dance with you.
Yeah. So let's save us.
Help us, please.
Is everyone in chat finger dancing too? Because this would be awkward if this were just us. Is it just me now? Just me finger dancing? Okay. All right. Woo! Chat. What did you think of that interview? LaTia is such a powerhouse. I'm so excited we got to chat. Oh, good. All right. Everyone in chat is finger dancing. Thank you. We've even got some kind of finger dancing repurposed emotes. I love that. Oh, everyone, and thank you. You all have my back. Of course, we're finger dancing. Oh, yeah, LaTia was wonderful. I'm really, really excited to talk to Aabria next. I hope I'm saying her name right. I'm realizing now I did not ask for pronunciation. And I know I've heard her name said out loud before on the Roll20 Lost Minds of Fandelver and some other streams, and now I'm forgetting. So that's embarrassing. But you know what? Sometimes you do embarrassing things, and that's okay. What is everyone most excited for D&D Block Party? Behind the stage, Aabria is loading in, so I'm doing a wave to her, but also a wave to everybody. You're totally good, Celeste, behind the scenes.
You are crushing it right now, by the way.
Oh.
It's so fun to watch. Also, hi!
Hi! I wonder if, as you're being loaded in, chat, can you everybody hear Aabria in the background? Also, am I saying your name right?
It's a really dumb story that I can say. Both Aabria and Aabria are acceptable pronunciation.
Oh, okay.
I changed the pronunciation of my name as a child.
Oh, you know what? I changed the spelling of my name and it confuses everybody, so.
Respect. Yay!
Oh, hooray!
Hello!
Yay! We are back with our next Behold Her live interview, our first ever episode recorded live for all. We are now joined by Aabria Iyengar, or Aabria Iyengar, who is the Chief Marketing Officer for Dice Envy, a streamer, and just all-around pillar of the community. So thank you for joining me for Behold Her. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. It's one of those like long-time listener, first-time caller.
I'm
geeking out.
Though. I've
been a fan, so I'm just like, oh my god, hi.
Hello. Hi.
Try to resist just going into full like geek sweats.
But
it's early. Okay. I can change shirts.
It's just like shoulders up. You can just kind of like,
yeah, right. Just if you see me get very low in frame, we're just trying to hide some moisture. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
Well, I'm so excited to hear what your story has been in the TRPG community. How about let's set the scene. Tell us, how did you get into TRPGs?
So I wrote in the way a lot of women do. I was the girlfriend of my now husband, who his like group of friends, like they were mutual friends, but they're mostly his like board game friends, were like, let's try D&D. Oh, Aabria, I guess you can come too, and you can be the healer. And I didn't realize how big a trope that was right away. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll be the cleric. This is fine. And after about 2 sessions of Horde of the Dragon Queen, I was like, I'm a warlock now, and I like this more than everyone. So I went from 0 to 100 on it very quickly, just because I have a stand-up and improv background. And I was like, oh, this is all the fun of being performative without the like, I don't know, all the other stuff that comes with having to like perform for strangers. So it scratched a lot of itches immediately. So I went from a home game to Adventurers League. I was all over the west side of LA, just like, do you have a game? Do you have a game? Can I get in? What are you running? What's this module? Let me just slide my bard on into there. So I was obnoxious for like the first year all over LA. And then, Happy Jacks was my first like stream community. And funnily enough, I grew up on D&D 5th edition. Mm-hmm. And this is all, by the way, like in the last like 4 years. So I'm relatively new to the community. I've tried to make up for it in sheer volume of games.
Catching up.
Yeah, exactly. But then everything, like most of the stuff I did at Happy Jacks was learning other RPG systems and realizing that the world was like pretty wide and broad as well as deep. And then eventually coming back to the first like streamed campaign I ran was D&D. It was Waterdeep Dragon Heist. And I've kind of never looked back from there. And now I stream a bunch. And it's really good and fun.
What's nice about Dungeons and Dragons is, while not necessarily, I don't know if there is a perfect game out there, so it's not necessarily a perfect game, but it is definitely, I think, the most well-known game of its genre. Sure. So it is a great gateway TRPG.
It really is. And it has this really nice benefit of, especially in comparison to a lot of indie games, it's got like good structure to it. And I think, especially for people like trying to figure out what collaborative storytelling with like a random number generator in order to like add in some chaos, what that even feels like. It's nice to have this structure of you can pick martial classes that are a little easier to like just pick up and run with. Like I'm a fighter, my fighter comes with like a rock and I smack people with it. Good, I've got it. Or you can get like really into the weeds with wizards and picking like spells and like the intersection of like types of magic and the kind of like flavor you want to put on your caster. So I feel like it's got really good bones and really good structure to help people like learn about what tabletop roleplay games are, period. So I feel like it's the big dog in the game for like a reason, like a really good reason.
So I've heard you mention cleric, then warlock. You alluded to bard. Do you have a favorite class or type of character to play?
I am a huge fan of charisma-based casters.
Oh my gosh, a woman of my heart. Okay.
Yes. I think it's really funny. I'm super fiddly and I love playing with lots of stats, but I feel like I always come back to warlocks all the time, even though it's like, yeah, there's like 2 spell slots and it's actually like pretty simple. It's one of the simpler casters to pick up and run with because you don't have a ton of like stuff to keep up with as far as your spell casting goes. But there's something so interesting to me about the relationship between a warlock and their patron and all the different ways that can manifest and what it means to like the internal life of the character. That like I feel like I come back to warlock all the time. I love bards. I think all of us here are like, yeah, like I'm a bard in real life and I'm a bard in my game. But I can't help but come back to warlocks every time because it's so interesting.
Do you have a favorite warlock that you've played in particular in terms of that like patron warlock relationship you mentioned?
Yes. In my current home game that I'm playing in and not running, I play a Hexblade warlock. One Hexblade, amazing. Stupendous. You get to do so much and feel like this great utility on both martial and casting like the kit is just phenomenal. And I love this idea of making a character that like it's a sort of like, well, surprise, you're a warlock. So like in the backstory, Bay, I named a character Bay. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry about it. And I sprinkle my Eldritch Blast and it's
never apologize for Bay.
Thank you. But she like is like the leader of a foreign land that like inadvertently died and was brought back by the Raven Queen. So she's sort of a warlock by like not by choice, where she's like, I guess I owe you. Sure, let's go deal with Orcus. You're very weird. We don't talk very much. I'm not a huge fan of birds, the peripheral vision when they kind of just flutter in. So she has this like weird fear of birds and like a weird relationship with warlock. And I love it because she's just sort of neurotic and sassy, like me. I don't know how to play.
All my characters are secretly me.
Right? Isn't that, oh my gosh. Okay. Sorry. I know you're supposed to be running the interview, but like, how often do you feel like you play a character that is just like some strong aspect of yourself?
I feel like I've also been told that all of my characters have like some sort of like really strong like quirk that makes them kind of weird but lovable. And I feel like that's an aspect of my personality. Like I explore different little bits of my personality that way. Are you the same?
Oh yeah, hard same. Oh man, it feels so good though. It's like this weird sort of therapeutic, like, okay, I feel like I noticed this about myself. What if I like push that to the forefront and really explore what it means and kind of like play in the sandbox of like parts of your personality? And I don't know, it feels really cool.
Is it a conscious thing, like a purposeful decision that you make, or something you kind of realize after?
I feel like it's a thing I realized after. Like I would love to be one of those people that's like, I made a very long like discussion about my internal like, no, I just made a weird choice and then realized later on, usually like months down the line, when the character like is its own thing and I can like sort of compartmentalize it to like, Bay is different from Aabria, and yet like she's not, because I feel like I'm dealing with this like sense of like responsibility and like the begrudging being put upon to be a certain kind of person for people. Like, yeah. And I think like later you just sort of like find a way to put parts of yourself into your characters, and that's like what makes them feel truthful and meaningful. And
I feel like that's part of what makes TRPGs like one of my favorite hobbies, because it really is. I mean, it's a game and it's storytelling, but part of it feels real. I guess like the interactions are real. The bonds you're forming with your party are real because there's
really
a little bit of you in that character. And in their characters, little bits of them.
Like I will always, that first group of friends that like I didn't necessarily feel like super close to before we started that campaign, it lasted like 3 or 4 years, and now they have this like space in my head where I'm like, yeah, do you remember that time when we like stopped Tiamat and we like pushed her back in a hole? And like I understand that that didn't actually happen, but like all of those emotional highs, like those are real, and they have like impressed upon me like this sense of camaraderie with the group, that even though we were doing fake things in our brains, like the emotions are real and like that bonding is real. And like that's the cool part of RPGs for me, is that you can live a lot of lives and like carry all of those like cathartic and like wonderful experiences with you the whole time, even though it was just words you were saying at a table and not me being like out in the streets slapping dragons.
But also life goals.
Right. Please give me that opportunity. Yeah. The way 2020 is going, honestly, maybe.
We might be slapping dragons by December.
Right? Would not be surprised if Tiamat is like low-key responsible for at least like 12% of this. Murder hornets feel like her bag. That feels like hers.
Murder hornets, maybe they were scouting. Oh no, right? I'm very worried right now.
They are just tiny dragons, and no one got close enough to realize it.
Not big bees, tiny dragons.
There you go. equal amounts of fear in my brain. If you say huge bee or tiny dragon, same clench. Like, oh no, thank you.
Same clench. Oh, I'm just gonna perish by the end of this interview.
Yeah, I was sent before I arrived. Watching you and LaTia talk, it's just been a great morning so far.
So how did you make this transition from going full in on D&D to DMing and GMing games?
Ooh, I think it's all kind of based in this, like, I also like writing, and I've done a little bit of like script work and like punch up. So like, yeah, writer background. And then I realized that the modules never came out fast enough. Sorry, D&D, I need more all the time. Please and thank you. And I think there was a lot of, there's always a really strong sense of like, I love chasing the tables fun. So we would go off on like weird long tangents, and I would end up having to like throw like universe in front of my players when they're like, oh, I guess we're just going to go to the left and not deal with anything from like the frost giants. We'll go over here and you guys can start a bakery. So I think I got so into the idea of like writing extra content for my for the little bit of campaign work that I was doing when I was running stuff, because I also did it. I was a DM for some of the kids I used to tutor a lot. So like their parents would be like, oh, hey, when you're finished with math, we invited 4 of his friends over and you're going to run Storm King's Thunder. I'm like, well, okay, this is fine. So the more I was kind of writing around the edges of like campaigns, I realized it was this like cycle of like wanting to do more. I was like, oh, I have more ideas, and that means I want to like share them with more people. So it just became this like hungry hippo of like grabbing more opportunities to tell stories and to create characters and like, I don't know, just play with these little like half ideas and see if across a campaign they could become something. And sometimes they don't, and sometimes they do.
Do you have any favorite tips you like to share with other GMs?
Ooh.
Also, you've GM'd on stream a bunch, so I'm wondering if you have tips like for GMing in general, and then is it different when you're doing it in front of a live audience?
Oh, yeah. I think there's a massive difference between like stream GMing and home game GMing. One, the pacing is just so incredibly different. With a home game, you take breaks like for snacks and bio breaks, and it's part of this relaxed like sense of like hanging out that I think it takes a lot. Like there are plenty of tables that are like very serious and we're here to play. But it's really easy to break into, oh, this moment reminds me of like some movie that I was watching, and like the ability to flow back and forth between the fiction that you're weaving together and like how that affects your real life. Like I feel like in a home game, you're always a little more aware that you're a person hanging out with your friends. And something about stream games to me feel a little more like you're dropped into a character, and it reminds me more of like acting and sort of like putting on a role for an amount of time. So I think my biggest tip for GMs in the stream world is the establishing and preservation of tone. And this is a thing that I did not start with, and I'm literally still working on myself. I've had a lot of good GMs in the world, like Emily, frankly, Emily, and like Zach Eubank, and like just a ton of people who are really good at saying like, the mood that we're going to define for the duration of this stream is this, and you're going to be aware of it. And everything I'm going to do, I will curve like down to the cadence, and my physical appearance will be a reinforcement of that tone. And I feel like it helps players like sit in and live in like the fiction for as long as the cameras are rolling. And I think that's doubly important. Like right now, we're all kind of dealing with like remote streaming and how that feels. And I am in my house right now, and there's a cat over there that wants to be touched, but only a little bit. And then he will smack my hand. And there's just 100,000 other things around you. So I think the ability to like find something to leech onto and feel like you're pulled into the moment and can't easily be distracted by the sundry things around you is like super important. And at like a general GM tip, I think when you are establishing places, especially things that don't have like a ton of box text associated with them, when you're like, oh, you walk into the inn and you meet Jarmathy Biggins, the innkeeper, and you're kind of just like making stuff up on the fly. I'm a huge fan of the improv trick of like, decide one thing that's a hard truth for the person or the place or the thing or the ideology that you're trying to present to the group, and let everything else flow from that, and play the like, if this is true, then what's the next thing that's true? So if Jarmathy Biggins is terrified of trees, just make a weird decision. What else is true because of that? Like, is he the one bartender whose like entire like facility is made of stone instead of like well-worn wood? And what does that mean? Is he weird when druids come in? Like, what does that mean? Like, how does he feel about like pets? Like, there's so many other things you can think about if this one big weird idea is true. And it can actually make the whole world feel like it makes sense, because like players, even if they're not actively trying to like pop holes in your like reasoning, everyone's always low-key aware of like consistency. It's why there's 100,000 video essayists on YouTube about like plot holes and inconsistencies in fiction. So if you decide one thing, it can be super wild, like the innkeeper that hates trees. But everything else that flows from that, as long as it makes sense and reaffirms that core truth, like everyone will be like 100% more bought in on dealing with Jarmathy and his weird inn from there on. And it's really easy as like for note-taking purposes to write down one thing that's true, because then everything else is just a decision you make that like reaffirms that weird truth.
Can I just say, and I'm going to say this for our listeners who aren't experiencing chat with us right now, that chat has exploded with love for Jarmathy Biggins. We stan one terrified of trees innkeeper. I love the thought that his building would be of stone because he's even afraid of dead trees.
Right.
I would, if I were in this campaign, put my adventurer's life on the line for Jarmathy. So thank you for this gift.
I would sacrifice everything for Jarmathy. Also, I'm sorry about the name. I can't think of NPC names, and I just mushed together names of people from like my kindergarten class, and I'm like, all right. Makara, that's the name too, and I'm sorry. Oh boy.
Oh my gosh. Long live Jarmathy, down with the trees in chat. This is what a delight. Okay, I could talk about Jarmathy for another hour. But I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about another aspect of your professional life, which is that you work for a company called Dice Envy.
I do.
So give us the Dice Envy pitch and then tell us what your role is there.
Okay, Dice Envy. So there's so many very cool, very awesome dice makers in the space. And I think the big idea here is that it's not that we're all like competing with the same sets of dice to the same audience. I think there's different kinds of dice for different kinds of players. And Dice Envy's sort of hedgehog concept, referencing Good to Great, which is a weird business book, I don't know, it's pretty good, is that we are for the irreverent, like the sort of like goofy bard in the corner, the Sam Regals, if you will. So all of our dice, well, most of our dice usually have like a very goofy name that is a little wink to the fact that like when you're in an RPG game, like it's fun. And that's it at the end of the day. So we have a set of dice that looks like Captain America themed, and they're called America's Earth. I don't know if I can say
You're allowed to say it.
Okay. And then we have like cool swirled purple and blue dice that are like Lich Slap and Vibe Check, and like just sort of that like when you can't help but let pop culture and a grin leak through in your games. So those are Dice Envy dice, and I'm currently the chief marketing officer. So if there's a set of dice names that you like, probably the one that named them. And other than that, I'm also the person that posts on socials not frequently enough. So
I've definitely noticed Dice Envy has like some of my favorite names for dice. Every time you do a tweet like to promote some new dice, I'm like, that's super cheeky. No, it's a Dice Envy tweet without even looking at the little icon next to the tweet.
Thank you.
So that branding is tight.
Oh, thank you so much. It's also very fun. I think it's just the most me I can make dice, because I do feel that like as much as I love holding like serious tone in games, I have to work very hard at it as both a player and a GM. So I feel like Dice Envy is like my opportunity to just be like a cheeky little imp in the corner, just like, ha ha ha, these dice are named after musical theater concepts. This is the game we're playing today, and sort of run off. And we have a cool monthly box too. So if you have never had enough dice, we will send you them every month. And COVID has been kind of wild. So dealing with like the backlog of stuff from factories. Unfortunately, this last month had to be the Mapril box, because we had to mix them together because time doesn't mean anything anymore. So
that is true.
We'll just mush months together. It's fine.
Mapril. Is there an aspect to making, producing dice, running a dice company that you think nobody realizes but that they should know?
I think the big thing is realizing like the amount of like time dilation that happens between conception of like a dice type, and then unless you are one of these awesome like handmade dice people that can like literally like go and have an idea and get the materials immediately and pour it off and like make it and sell off individual sets, it's a lot of discussion between manufacturers, and a lot of us have multiple manufacturers, so we have to go like, can you make this? Is concrete dice a thing? Do you want to do that? Do you have a spot open? Like, so there's so many narratives and going back and forth and sampling and making sure like, oh, when I said red, I meant this specific Pantone, and that's on me. I'm very sorry. So like lots of back and forth to go from ideation to realization with sets. So it can be a little like, it's hard when you have like a cool idea of something that's like kind of in like the zeitgeist, and you're like, oh, so the new D&D like module that was announced, or actually Mythic Odyssey of Theros is another one that like when I first heard about it, I was like, oh, we should figure out how to do some dice about it. And we're still figuring it out because it just takes months upon months to go and actually have a physical product that you can offer. And I think that's like probably the biggest thing that a lot of people don't know, is that it takes a really long time to get math rocks.
That makes me extra appreciate like every cool new release I see you all do, just knowing how much work and how many people are involved really to getting that final product out there.
Oh, thank you.
So
Also, by the way, I remember when you like you first like tweeted something about Dice Envy, and I was in a staff meeting and I saw it and I screamed and like a little bit threw my iPad at my boss, and it was super awkward. So
I
thanks
really
for that
like Dice
moment.
Envy. I'm going to squee a little bit about Dice Envy. What I like about Dice Envy, aside from the cheeky names, is that you all produce a lot of like really cool, what is the word? Like intricate, not intricate, but like it's like pretty dice that have like little designs around numbers and such. I really love the heart dice that you all produce. But what's difficult about those dice styles is that a lot of times it makes it really difficult to read. But I feel like Dice Envy has a really good balance of being legible and beautiful at the same time.
Thank you. I think that's also a big, thank you so much. I think that's also part of the process of going from like design idea. And also I am the sole, in addition to being the sole person of color, I'm also the sole woman in our company. So a lot of my design choices and aesthetic are like, make it purple and fiddly, add glitter. So there's usually a lot of like, I guess we'll let Aabria's idea get sampled out, and then it's illegible because I'm like, oh, all the glitter's on the top, and it's just you just have to grab the die and like put it inside your eyeball to see what the number is. So trying to get that balance like usually takes a lot of work and a lot of tamping down of enthusiasm from certain people. But thank you. It's hard, like trying to make sure that the dice are useful on top of being like as fussy as I can get away with it is a fun problem.
Yeah. So you create math rocks with Dice Envy, you stream a whole bunch, and you GM and you play in games. What does it mean to you in both the hobby and the industry to be a woman in these roles?
I think it's kind of there's a lot of pressure and a lot of expectation to always represent like an underrepresented population well. Because like when I first started off with Adventures League games, I quite often was the only woman there, or one of like one or two, or just sort of that like tokenism problem that I feel like, in addition to like the sort of stress of being the one woman there and trying to make a good impression and prove to some of the less flexible players that like women make good players, and like the things that we care about aren't detractions from the narrative and aren't like weird distractions, and we're not like the big pile of tropes and stereotypes that like some players think we are when we come to a table. But I think it's really fun because I think the moment you become, or you come in from the outside to a space, you have new, like it's like a breath of fresh air and there's new things to offer. And like the creative concepts that can come from women and people of color and like LGBTQIA people, like we have different perspectives and we have different ways that we can approach scenarios. So I love that, like, I don't come from like a high fantasy love. Like I'm not a huge Lord of the Rings fan. Sorry about it. It's fine. Or a like strong sense of like Western European wargaming. So when I approach problems, it's usually through the lens of like my favorite kinds of fiction, which are like anime and like action movies and comedies. So all of that filters how I approach things, which is why I tend to play charisma casters the most, because I like that party face. And if I can like lie or trick my way out of a scenario rather than like going toe to toe and just fighting my way through it, like those are things I prefer. And I think that's part of the perspective that like I bring to a table that might not be there for people who have different like backgrounds and paths of accessing and becoming a part of the D&D community. If that makes any sense. If it didn't,
that makes total sense. And if I speak only for myself, but I kind of have the feeling I'm speaking for a lot in chat and probably folks listening, I love that breath of fresh air that you are bringing to the community. If folks want to read more about what you're doing, what's coming up next for you, how can they find you on the interwebs?
You can catch me on all social media at Quiddie, Quiddie, and I stream a bunch, so I'm not gonna like spend minutes trying to remember because I'll always forget like 3 things. But if you follow me, especially on Twitter, I can keep you all up to date with where you can catch me on any given day. Oh, but you can catch me later today at 3. So come back for that.
I had so much fun chatting with you. I wish we had like a million more minutes to chat, but I know we've got another panel coming up. So I'm going to let Celeste transition us out. And will you dance with me to No Music?
Yes, please.
Yes. Okay.
I've wanted this.
I'm going to finger dance.
Nice. I'm going to do like a small...